What are your favourite memories of your favourite local video store growing up? Well, for me, it was Dave's Video Store / petrol station in Bowral in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, Australia during the 80s. So quite a unique little video store. It was more eccentric than any of your chain video stores like Video Easy or Blockbuster or any of those. Dave's really had a lot of heart, a lot of soul. Dave himself wasn't particularly interested in movies. He was a guy probably in his 50s at the time. Red hair, red moustache, nice bloke, fairly curt a lot of the time, got straight to the point, but I kind of like people like that. It kind of offsets my my waffling at times. And Dave was more interested, obviously, in the mechanics side of things and the petrol side of things. The video side of things was just a bit of a side business for him. He was obviously an astute businessman, recognised the market, of course. There was nothing else in town like it, at least to begin with. And for me, it was a place of magic and wonder. So it was quite a darkened video store. Dave would be sitting at the counter. He'd be smoking Winfield Blues, smoking cigarettes with a full ashtray right there at the counter. That's the way it was back in the day. You could smoke in video stores, let alone bars and all those sort of places where you'd expect to find people smoking in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, he'd be there. They're just chilled out behind the counter doing his books or whatever else. Wasn't really interested in the movies, but he didn't need to be. It was kind of a archaeological place for a kid like me. Dave's Video Store. It was dark, it was dusty, mysterious. He had the beta section, which even though we didn't have a beta machine, we came late to the whole home video party, so we're very, very much in the VHS era. But the beta section was there nonetheless. That was a tiny section, about 1 metre by 1 metre, and the choices for the beta crowd were quite limited, to say the least. But it was what it was. So those of you who are a little younger, you wouldn't mistake a beta video for a VHS video. They were considerably bigger, and they would never fit in your machine in a million years into your VHS machine, so there was no need to worry about mistakenly renting a beta, aside from the disappointment that you might find taking it home and realising that it was a beta cassette. But the VHS section, of course, was much bigger, and it was much different than it became later in the whole chain store era of stores like Blockbuster and Video Easy, Star Channel, Hollywood Boulevard, and so on and so forth. You might remember a few of these different chains from the 80s and early 90s, and if you do, I'd be more than happy for you to list a few of them in the comments, and also your memories about your favourite video store. But basically, Dave would sit there sort of chain smoking, as maybe talking to one of my parents, chin wagging about the kinds of things that used to matter when Bowral was a bit more of a community, I guess. Now it's kind of a bolt hole for the rich and famous, which is a little unfortunate. But so a lot of the original residents have left, myself included. But yeah, so they'd be there chatting to Dave about people they mutually knew, catching up on gossip and so on and so forth. And they'd be doing more talking than Dave because he was a man of few words. And I'd be left to peruse the shelves. So my favourite section, of course, was the horror section. And that won't come as a surprise to too many of you. But the horror section was basically my place of the video store as far as I was concerned, the main place I was interested in. And quite a limited selection there. And it did make you more, having a limited selection was good in a way. It made you more discerning. Quite often you'd be re-renting something purely because you'd enjoyed it so much. This was in the days before things like tape trading and retail home video sales. So it was all about the covers, of course. The cover sold everything. There were films there like Humongous, Death Ship, Friday the 13th Part 2. If you wanted to keep up with a film series, you were usually shit out of luck, because you might see Friday the 13th Part 2 there and Friday the 13th, the final chapter, but the rest of the series might be strangely absent. So you'd have these limited exposures to some of these films. So Dave had good example of that. Dave had Day of the Dead from director George A. Romero, and that was the first of Romero's trilogy that I saw. So I'm quite unlike most people in that regard. I guess most people have their first experience with Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, but for me it was Day of the Dead. It was quite confusing with the box art at the time for a young strapper like me, because the box art of our Australian Day of the Dead release was basically a screen grab from Return of the Living Dead. From memory, it was a screen grab of the ambulance scene from Return of the Living Dead, the zombie looking up at them from the headed brains of the paramedic in the rain. So that was the misleading cover art of the Australian Day of the Dead VHS release. But that's what it was like back in the day. The cover didn't necessarily tell the truth. It was the original clickbait. So you might be inclined to see a Italian movie with some awesome painted cover art that was just incredibly impressive, and the movie really had Buckley's chance of living up to it, but it was still great nonetheless. And then in cases like, there were other cases like the Day of the Dead situation where they just randomly use a screen grab from another film to sell the movie, which, so I guess in a manner of speaking, that was the original clickbait decades before the internet. But none of us seemed to mind, of course. My brother would get angry when he'd rent a movie that had that looked like an above board Hollywood feature, all the trimmings, and then we'd get it back and we'd find that when it went into the machine, surprise, surprise, the whole thing was overdubbed, and it was in fact an Italian action film or an Italian horror film or an Italian war movie. And my brother would always be disappointed by that, sometimes devastated, but it did foster an early love for Italian cinema in me. I really wasn't particularly concerned with lips not matching up or any of those sort of things. As far as I was concerned, it was all about the magic and the mystique of these films. You didn't know where they were made or by whom. This was pre-internet days. They were quite mysterious. And when you picked these up in Dave's, it really did feel like an archaeological find, which was what being a film fan was all about, and I wish it was still about, believe you me. So Dave wasn't too big on new releases. Basically, he'd just have one copy of each new release. So often you had to wait months to see anything that was new release. So generally I'd go for the 7 for $10 for a week option if I was on school holidays or had the time. And that was good value for money. It was often the best $10 you'd spend out of your pocket money. And quite a few people would go that way. People would often, with the new releases, people would share videos back in the day when people spoke to their neighbours and when times were a bit simpler. So you'd basically, either you or your neighbour would rent a movie, they'd watch it at the prime time, then they'd get their kid to hurriedly run it down to your place, or vice versa. I was a video courier a number of times, and so you'd get two families enjoying the one video rental, basically. And so I guess in a way, that was the original sharing the password of streaming services. So that's how we did things when Dave's was open. Unfortunately, as is always the way, you saw these bigger and better chain stores open. First we had Hollywood Boulevard in the main street of Bowral, then we had Star Channel, and finally we had Video Easy. And there just wasn't room for Dave's video selection anymore. People wanted like 30 copies of the latest lobotomy in a box in the new release section. So he really couldn't compete with that sort of thing. It was only the diehards that were perusing his weeklies, his black dot specials, and so on and so forth. Black dot specials were a big thing back then. That's how you knew you were getting a weekly movie for $1. Generally, multiple video stores would have that, several in my hometown. And yeah, that was Dave's video store. So it is part of what makes you fall in love with cinema Unfortunately, that's one of the great Greek tragedies, I guess, is that kids nowadays don't get to have that experience. They don't get to explore these dank, darkened, dingy mum and dad video shops, find these little hidden treasures, and find movies that they'll remember for a lifetime, and experiences with the family they'll remember for a lifetime, experiences loaning these movies to neighbours who they used to talk to at the time, and now nobody really knows their neighbours particularly well, which is another one of those unfortunate byproducts of progress and a progressive world, I guess. So yeah, that was Dave's video store in Barrel in New South Wales, in the Southern Highlands of Australia. And if you have any memories, any video store memories, what was your favourite video store? Maybe what was the first video you ever rented? If you do feel inclined to comment, by all means, please comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And otherwise, that's about all I've got for today. And I'm off to enjoy the rest of my day and hope to see you next time.